Okay, we're live. I need to get back my numbers. I think it's the 45th edition of the Data Value Show. Today we're going to be looking at optimizing business with fractional data teams. We're going to decompose what fractional data teams is all about. And without further ado, I'm going to bring in Shane Gibbs all the way from New Zealand. How you doing? How you doing, Shane?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me. Just thinking we need to create some data quality tests on your numbers there, because I'm sure you've used 45 before.
Maybe I have. It's someone get excluded from the numbers. They didn't make the cut, but yeah. So it's getting there. And a bit about, we used to put the numbers in the name of the show, but it didn't help with the SEO stuff. So like we took them out. So there you go. So that's I haven't had my business process updated yet to actually make sure I got the right number. But yeah, so I normally start with an intro of how I met the guest, and I think I alluded to this on the introduction for the show, one of my posts. So we first met on a LinkedIn post that we were just talking about just in backstage. I think it was about business requirements, and that if you had to be close to the business to actually really understand what you're doing. And I think someone had called out that you didn't, and he was a regular, he was called a troll or an inspiration maybe for me in the wrong way of like seeing some of the viewpoints of people out there that were just totally polar opposite to what I thought was the right thing of doing. And I think I went away and you called bollocks on him. You bollocks times one or something. Anyway, he came back with another one. I think he'd been away for about 15 minutes or something. And I come back and we're up to bollocks times 10, and it was highly educational. Well, so highly amusing, but and also a good idea is, are we just talking in an echo chamber, which we were talking about? By the way, it's always good to have our points challenged, but normally in a constructive way is what's favourable. With that sort of background, do you want to give yourself an intro of bit of background on yourself, Shane?
Yep. So co-founder of agiledata.io. So I've been doing that for just over 5.5 years. I've been in data for 30 odd years now. So I kind of think about it as 3 decades. The first decade was working for some large software vendors that were based in the US, but I was based in New Zealand in the data space. Second decade was running a consulting company. So the usual, 5 to 20 consultants going out and doing a bunch of work for large enterprises. And my last decade's been a combination of coaching data and analytics teams in Agile and doing our startup. So got to say, I kind of enjoyed the last decade more than I enjoyed the first 2.
That's good. Well, the next decade will get even better, especially with AI.
Yeah. I expect to do nothing, just let the AI machine, the AI machine do it all for me, right? Because that's what it's going to do.
Oh, exactly. It's going to co-pilot our whole lives. So yeah, with the title of the show being optimizing businesses with fractional data teams, and we were just talking about this just before. So let's unpack what's a fractional data team in the context that you're using it.
So I think about it as a fraction, right? A part of a whole number. So the problem that fractional data teams solve is when an organization needs access to skills over a reasonable period of time, but they can't afford to pay for those skills full time, then they get a fractional person or a fractional team. And if we think about it, there's this whole movement around virtual CXOs. So if you're a small company, you'll get a virtual CFO who spends a portion of their time doing your accounts, doing your financials, helping you do your financial planning. Intriguing about why that doesn't happen in the data world, right? Because data is a set of skills. It is typically incredibly expensive. So I always talk about the fact that very rarely do we see a team of one in the data space. There's always 3 or 5 of us. We kind of like to work together, follow around in a pack. And so if you look at that, that's automatically, depending where you are in the world, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in salary a year, right, for reasonably skilled people. If you're an organization that's less than 100 employees and you're not a venture capital funded startup, so you're a profitable organization, less than 100 employees, that cost for that data team is quite large compared to the rest of your organization. And then we can get into whether data is a cost or a value and that kind of stuff. But the question then is, why can't those organizations, those smaller organizations, actually leverage the skills from a fractional team like they do with a fractional chief marketing officer or fractional chief financial officer? So proven business model does not really apply to data that often.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. But with our company at the beginning, we had a fractional CFO, and we've had a couple over the time until we got to the point of we need a full-time CFO, and we've got that. I think the reason why it probably hasn't, there's probably many, but one that's just jumped to mind as you were saying that is why it hasn't been common up until now, seeing that approach in the data world. I think the business is understanding what they actually need from a data team and actually understand what metrics or activities to provide that fractional team to actually do, and then measure how they achieve it, how they perform against it, which hopefully maybe this is a sign of business getting a better idea of what they need from their data teams. Business realizing that, we talked about this, skills over roles. I don't need to have a full-time architect on here the whole time. I don't need to have a full-time security expert on the team the whole time. Now I know how much of that time I need, maybe based on historical understanding. Okay, look, I've seen the last whole project. The guys are all saying they're blocked half the time. I've looked at my agile burn down, and these guys are underutilized, but because we haven't given what they need in time, or they're waiting for things to come along. So, do you think that's one of the reasons that it's maybe becoming more acceptable now to have that approach?
So I differentiate consulting or project work or data tasks from a fractional team. So again, let's just go back to that CFO, right? That scenario that you had when you started. You didn't tell them, your CFO, that you wanted to buy somebody that could process the accounts payable invoices and do the general ledger for you, right? You didn't tell them, that you wanted an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet to do your financial planning. What you probably told them is, hey, I know I've got a gap, right? I know I'm probably going to get a full-time person into my team when it makes sense, which is not right now. Come and do the job for me because you're an expert, right? You're experienced in that. When we talk about data, we tend to want to go and actually tell the person what to do, right? And with fractional teams, for me, it's about bringing in that expertise and experience, saying, we know data is valuable. We know we're not doing it. Come in and do it with us. Not to us, right? Not the consulting model of do it to us and get out. It's come in, be part of the team, right? That's why it's called a fractional data team, not a consultant. So come and join the team, but just don't join it 40 hours a week. Join it for a smaller period of time. And that is hard, right? As a fractional, it is hard to be there part-time. And there's a whole lot of reasons we can discuss around that. But that's the core, is you're hiring a person or a team to do the work because they know how to do it. And they're bringing that expertise as much as they're bringing that effort. So if you're hiring a fractional team and then you're very specific about the actual data tasks or the technologies, then you're probably not hiring a fractional data team. You're hiring a consultant or a contractor, and they are, in my head, different.
Yeah. So again, just looking at that, how that will work in some organisations. So if that fractional team is providing, they're going to be more senior ones. So for example, maybe a fractional CDO, fractional architecture. But if it's a mixed team, or I'm assuming that they're going to have some of their own permanent employees there. Some of the challenges will come with that ownership and responsibilities from an organisation hierarchy. So, how would organisations have to deal with that complication, should we call it? Of now I've got this person here actually who's a permanent person reporting to a fractional person that's only here part of the time. So, will you have to maybe? People management will have to split from activity management, and then have a line management that still looks after the employee.
Yeah. So when I was coaching data and analytics teams, we often talked about pastoral care versus work to be done. And so what we found was when we split the pastoral care role, the role of looking after people, making sure that they're healthy, that they're safe, that they're getting career growth, from the work being done, from the team actually doing the work, that was highly valuable. And the reason was, you want the team to be in charge of their own work, right, in an agile way. And it is kind of like a marathon with lots of sprints, right? It's kind of weird. Like we talk about sprints, but actually it's a marathon. And it is draining because they're constantly in the factory, right, in the value stream, just building stuff. And so having this person that's outside that flow of work that just looks after the people and makes sure that the people are okay was a really important role. And that's probably the first time I'd actually go, that's a role, not a skill for me, right? It was like, this person is in charge of looking after the team from a pastoral care point of view. So if you're looking at a fractional team, I wouldn't recommend that the fractional person is pastoral care, right? That they're not coming in to look after your team. They're coming in to be part of the team doing the work. Now, they may be in a leadership role when that work's been done. They may be at an expert or a coach level, but I wouldn't recommend that they come in as a line manager, so to speak. Because they're not, the key thing again, right? They're fractional. They're not going to be available all the time, and that is a real challenge, right? If they're not there they're not there at the right time for your people, then you've got a bigger problem.
So you're 100% right, and the two things you mentioned there that the first one was mentoring. So so and that is that. Do you see that as another aspect of that fractional one? Is there helping to mentor and upskill the other team members that aren't in there, or is that a different?
No, so I think any person that's at a coaching level in their career should mentor people. It's just fun. B, it's the right thing to do. And if you think about it, you only got to that level because somebody mentored and coached you, right? So just pay it back, pay it forward, just do the right thing. And it's fun. Like I said, watching somebody grow to be better than you is just an amazing feeling.
I fully agree with that.
Yeah. So again, it's a difference between consulting and fractional behavior. As a consultant, it's kind of project, you're one and done, right? You come in, you get out. You don't you're not there for a long time. You're there for a good time. As a consultant, there is this natural tendency to want to protect the work around you because that's how you make money. If you're a fractional, you make money by adding value back to that organization on a regular basis, or you will no longer be part of their fractional team. And so that really changes the way you think, because every month, every quarter, you have to prove in your head and to the person that's paying you the value you gave back to the organization. And that value won't be tasks, right? It won't be, I did these things. It'll be, we achieved, as an organization, we achieved this using data. And again, it's that mind shift, right? Of being part of the team, not an external person that's coming in and then dropping out again.
So 100%. On the mentoring thing, I think I still learn stuff from the people I'm mentoring. That it's a feedback loop for me as well. So that's the reason why I do it. It was the main reason is people looked after me and helped me on my journey, and I enjoy giving that back. So the other thought I had was last week I did some agile bashing. I think on the show, and I know. But I was blaming some of the characteristics and way that were common methods of working have been cloud spend and agile practices has had negative impacts on some of that with people not actually building, not being accountable for what they're building, not reusing assets, everyone out for themselves in one different scrum team, not having that architecture oversight from it to actually see, how can we things all work together. So agile, it's great if it's used in the right way, but I think sometimes it's used to hide bad.
So let's just go down that rabbit hole, right? So agile has been
agile.
Now I'm going to get hand waving, right? Now I'm going to get angry, right? So everybody, rank coming. So agile has been incredibly successful, right? And we know that because it's now been commoditized, monetized, courserized, certificationized. It's now a fixed and movable thing. And we've got to go back to the core, right? Agile is not Scrum. Agile is not safe. Agile is not a methodology. It is not a practice. Agile is agility, right? It's the ability for a team to make changes fast with as low a risk as possible, right? That's all it's about, is how quickly can a team change what they're doing safely. And so, when I was coaching teams, they go, oh, so we're doing Agile, we're not doing planning. And it's like, bullshit. Why you wouldn't do anything in the world well without planning? You wouldn't build a house without planning, right? You wouldn't go on a 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't go on a trip without planning. You probably wouldn't create a meal without planning. No, you do light planning. That's the key, right? You don't want to spend 6 to 9 months planning before you execute, but you need planning. If you're in the data world, you need architecture. Again, we don't need an architect spending 9 months creating a 500-page document nobody's going to read, but we need the team to discuss, are we going to have data layers? How are we going to move the data? What are we going to do first? What are we going to do in 6 months' time? You need that light architecture and that light planning. And that's the value of agility. But what's happened due to its success is, it's got big consulting companies and certain people creating immutable, methodologies. So my litmus test for a team about whether they've adopted agility is what percentage of their time do they work on their way of working versus the work they're doing? How often do they look at the value stream, the things they do and the time between them and the hands-offs, and then actually change something in that way of working? Because if they're not changing the way of working, then they're probably they don't have as much agility as they could.
If I saw agility described as, if I saw the agile projects I've seen and witnessed described, would be delivered in the way you described, I would fully support you, and I'd be saying, yeah. But I think you're right. We picked on the big four. It's probably not only them as well, but it has been something to hide behind to some degree and it has introduced mindsets that probably aren't aligned to what we're just saying of having that architecture vision, having that runway, because they've come into this new and haven't unfortunately got the battle scars and common sense, maybe even to some degree of historical experience that they can leverage. So, but now we've agreed that agile is good in delivering the right way, but sometimes it can be used in a bad way. And we got out of that rabbit hole. We survived it. But back to the point of using fractional teams. And the thing I was thinking about, again, from sort of some actually better run agile projects I've worked on, where less in the data world actually, but wireframes being defined. That person defined that wireframe, part of the team, fractional part of the team, and they're only there to make sure that they had enough wireframes ahead of the time for the other team members to be able to have any dependencies for them to define any data structures, APIs, etc., etc. But so if we want to, going back into having a fractional architecture, a fractional even a data modeler. So if we're working in the way, the agile way you're describing, which is great, it would mean that fractional, we'd have to have some planning around the allocation of that fractional team with some to make sure that they are make sure they're putting any dependencies in there from any other downstream tasks that are in the agile board.
And so it comes back to complexity, right? So what we know is that a small team of 3 to 9 people is the most effective for ways of working. We know that as soon as we have more than one of those that have dependencies across each other, things get hard. So scaling team structure or team design is difficult. We know that as soon as we have a small team and one part of their work is reliant on somebody else that's outside that team, we now introduce wait time, we now introduce handoffs, we need to bring in some lean thinking. So we have all this complexity as soon as we start to do these things. So the easiest place to get value out of a fractional data team is the organizations that are too small to have their own team. And so that's typically, I see, if an organization is 0 to 5, the founders are doing the data work, right? They're kind of in Google Sheets, Excel, or if they're coders, they're doing some data code. As they grow, those founders need to get hands off the data tools, right, and into the growth tools and the strategy tools. So that's a perfect time for them to adopt a fractional data team, right? A group of people that are going to do the work with them. If they're 5 to 20, they've typically hired an analyst. That analyst is, using pandas or R or Python or, a draggy droppy tool, whatever. They're starting to get snowed, right? So what you're going to see is they're too busy. There's a massive pipeline. They've built this technical debt where actually a lot of the processes are still manual. So a percentage of their time, a large percentage is now kind of doing the drossy work, not any new work. And their natural reaction is to hire another analyst, right? And we already said, as soon as you get more than one, things start getting a little bit complex. And then the last one is, somewhere between 20 and 100, maybe a bit bigger depending where you are in the world. And you've typically brought in a head of data or a data lead or a tech lead for data because you want to start building out your team, and that's when you get the bill shock of what the salary is going to cost you. They're perfect organizations for a fractional data team because they can hire a team, right? So they effectively get, a team in a box for part of the time, and that team should bring a whole lot of stuff to the table. When you're bringing in fractional roles, now we've got complexity, right? Because that person has to adopt the ways of working of the organization that they're being fractional with. And if you just think about that for a second, right? As a fractional, you have to do more, you have to work with more than one organization, typically, unless you're semi-retired. So you're now working with 2 to 4 organizations over a week. You think about just the context switching of, I'm using, this one's a Databricks medallion architecture, this one's DBT 5,000 scripts with mad person's knitting, this one's old school Cognos with Oracle ETL. That context switching kills you. So, you've got to be really careful with fractional if you're doing that. But what you want to do then is if you're bringing somebody in as part of your team, you want to be very clear about where the handoffs and where the times are. So again, when we're looking at data and analytics teams, we often talk about brownout times, right? We talk about the product owner or the product manager being available for 50% of their time every morning for the team to talk to. We talk about, no meeting Thursdays, right? There's periods of time where the data team just want to do work and don't want to be interrupted. And so if you've got a fractional person coming into your team, you have to be very specific, very conscious around when they're available and when they're not, because the rest of the team now have to work around this problem of that person's not there 40 hours a week. They're only here at this period of time, and you've got to rack and stack those conversations for that reason.
So this link to something, we don't call it a fractional. We had something called a data care pack internally, which is, it's sort of like in between a retainer and, regular access to people, not embedded in the team as such, but they're on that birth sort of thing. They're hard to plan and work around sometimes, we've seen. But my thought was, how many fractional projects do you think a fractional team member can actually have them? Well, I know how hard it is to context switch. I do it far too much anyway. And I probably got a number in mind of what I think is the sweet spot of anything more than that's, obviously ideal one. But what do you think is a fractional person that's running a team? If you found out they're working on 5 other projects, is that too much? Do you want to say, okay, well, I want to make sure that they're not over allocated? What would be the maximum number of other projects they could do alongside?
So again, if I split between a team that's working together for an organization as a fractional team versus an individual that's taking a fractional role, as a fractional role, I could normally do 2 reasonably well. 3 to 4, I start to struggle. Anything out of that, I'm burning out.
I had three was in my mind to sort of like, 3. So it's a similar sort of thing.
And then as a consultant, what you're always doing was you always had the project or the customer work that was starting to bleed off, right? It was starting to finish. You had the core one that you were working on, that you're in the meat and potatoes, and then you're always looking for the next one to bring on. to carry on the work when the one that was bleeding off finishes. So, when I was consulting, normally, you're kind of trying to just juggle three at those various life stages. If you're a team, we have this theory that it's actually 10, right? And it's not proven yet. And the reason is, what we talk about with fractional teams is they bring everything with them. So they bring the ways of working, they bring the tools, they bring the technology, they bring the team. Because if you think about it, a data team typically chooses their own platforms, their own ways of working, right? Their own practices. If you're a fractional data team, you should just bring that. And the benefit you should give to the customer, right? And we've got to talk about the benefit to the organization is, I should be able to start on day one with that already done. I shouldn't be spending months doing designs and architectures, because I should come in and say, this is the way we work. You're buying this expertise that's already been done, and here it is. And the benefit is it's ready right now. Whether that's tools you've built or tools you just use, you should be able to deploy them and start using them on day one. So ideally, as a fractional data team, when you start with a new organization, you should have something in production in a day, if not a week, right? Now, there's always a whole lot of problems around data collection. That's why that always kills you. But that's what you should be trying to do, right? Is actually giving them the benefit of that expertise and experience.
That makes sense. Just a shout out to some of the people. So Val, as always, good to see you. Sachin, Steve McKay. We've got, even though it's LinkedIn user, I know it's Ramona because I'm looking on the on my phone as well. And I like it. I like this one anyway. Like drag droppy, clickety clackety. It's quite funny. But so I think you just answered this one in saying that fractional implies friction, but the friction comes with the thing you just solved. Like you've already come with all of these. If we've already come along with our ways of working, our platform already defined, a fractional team is going to be more effective and probably more of a better choice than hiring your own one if they come with that. So I think some of the complexity we were talking about earlier was, if they've got to try and work within another organisation's way of working, within their org structure or within their platform, how that platform's used. So do you see
difference between fractional team and a fractional person?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, so as we know, as soon as there is constraints, we get friction, right? So if you think about your data teams internally, assuming you still have business analysts that work in the data space, whatever you want to call them, if they're outside the team, we've now got friction, right? Because they've got a day job or they've got other things they're doing. The team can't access them. Heaven forbid you have a testing team that sits outside your data team, right? Now you've got friction. Heaven forbid you've got a deployment team and you can't deploy yourself, right? You've got friction. Heaven forbid you have an architect that has to sign everything off and they're not inside the team. You've got friction. So as soon as you break the circle of a team and you put things outside their control or you bring in dependencies for them, you've got friction. And it's no different if you've got a fractional person coming in. It's no different than, Steve being on leave for a month because he's going to Costa del Sol. You've now got a problem. You've got friction of that skill not being available when you need it. And it's no different if you bring in a fractional worker into your team.
So, and again, do you think there's a sweet spot? We talked about the size of company, and we've done some analysis internally, like who we target for the size organisation, which is going to have the problems that we can solve. And you're right on. Depending on how number of staff, how many people that would have the problem. I had Veronica on. We had a little pre-chat the other day, and we were throwing out some ideas of using Lego analogies and things like that. And we started off with stickle bricks. Stickle bricks, anyone can stick it together. It doesn't need any planning. If you break it, it's easy to put back together again. And that's not only, so that's looking at the complexity of your platform, but then the associated skills of the people that are looking after it of can they fix it if it goes wrong. And I suppose that as you go through that, you've got your Duplo, bigger bricks, but you can make a castle now at least, but it's not going to be a fine grain, it's not going to look like the Hogwarts castle out of Harry Potter, for example. Then you can have the concept of maybe mix and matching. It's a bit of Duplo in some rocks, but then with smaller Lego piece around it. And then I think the other two versions were you can have a kit that's designed to build a house. Your instructions come with it, or maybe a Death Star, or you can get it to this kit where it says, knock yourselves out. Here's the pieces. Make what you want out of it. But the where I was going with this is each one of those comes with a shape of a team, size, skills that go with it. If you get the two mismatched, so you have poorly skilled team and a really complex architecture, you're going to fail. If you're going to have Duplo bricks and the team that want to build a Lego Death Star, they're going to build your Lego Death Star anyway, but even though you didn't want it, or they're going to leave. So I think what you're highlighting, there's probably a sweet spot for many organizations out there that sit in there. Look, you could go and try and resource this, but you don't have a big enough requirement to get, you maybe get a best. It's like a very multi-skilled one person, they're going to be happy, but you've got a single point of failure. You might be able to have two specialisms, but you're not going to get the full bang for your buck out of them. Or you could go with this fractional approach that comes with a toolkit of how to use it as well. So we come with our ways working. We come with our suppliers of our bricks that we've already prefabbed to go and make what we need. We're going to be the most cost effective for you at that time. So is that summarize where you see it fits, or do you think fractional can go across?
Yeah. So again, I come back to if you're an organization that's looking to enter the fractional world, be very clear about what you're buying. So if you're buying a team, the expectation is that team should bring everything with them. Yeah. If you're buying a fractional person, then they have to assimilate into your way of working, and that has to be very clear where they fit. So I see two areas where it's kind of a no-brainer for a fractional team, right? And that's for those certain organizations of a certain size. And the two drivers of it is cost. So if you can't afford a permanent team, then fractional teams should be able to deliver the same service at least cost. And the second one is time to market. If you can't afford to spend 3 to 6 months for a team to come in, you hire them, you onboard them, you get their ways of working going, then deploying a platform. If you need that quicker, then that's what a fractional team should bring. Now, the key thing there is that's what they should bring, right? So if you're finding you're hiring a fractional team that then spends 3 to 6 months building out a platform for you, that's just a bunch of consultants. And there's nothing wrong with a bunch of consultants, right? If that's what you want and it's what you need, then do it. Let's be very clear that's what you're getting. Then you also want to be really clear about where they fit in your value stream. So what we want to do is we want to look at the value stream, right? Nodes and links. How's the work flowing through the organization with this fractional team being involved? And where are the constraints? So one of the things that we often do is our customers will have a technical person on their side as a permanent employee that looks after the data collection. Now, why would they do that? Because being external, being fractional, it's a nightmare trying to talk to the right people at the right time about being able to go and hook into that system and get CDC running, event streaming, right? Having a full-time person that can just be at those conversations at the right time, streamline that entire process. But what we found some really interesting scenarios, right? So you go, okay, so less than 100 employees, no data team. If they don't fit that model, fractional have no value to them. But then what we found there's a real value in what we call mixed spikies, research sprints. So what happens is the organization's larger, they have a full-time data team, and that data team's they're in the guts, right? They've got this massive backlog of value, they're in there, they're plumbing, they're building information products, they're pushing out that value, everything's prioritized, and there's just too much work for them, right? And now your natural thing is to bring in a fractional team to do that work. Don't. Because what are you going to do? You're going to force that fractional team to try and work the way your team does, or they're going to bring in their own ways of working, and now we've got friction, right? So having them co-work is a crazy idea in my experience. It's too frictional, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work means it can't work. It just means I have found it doesn't work. But what then happens is this team's flat out, and then somebody in a part of the organization has a great idea. AI, or what happens if we did this? And that idea has a massive amount of uncertainty. So we kind of don't know what, we know what the idea is, we know what the problem statement is, we know what the idea is, we haven't really ideated a solution, we haven't done any discovery, we haven't prioritized it. And we've got this backlog of work that we're working on. And so the organization, the data teams tend to go, we're too busy, that's a great idea, bugger off, right? Talk to the head. What we found is fractional teams are quite good at that kind of work. You set it up as a 3-month research spike. Everything's always 3 months for some weird reason. And then you do that work, and the outcome of that work is reducing uncertainty, right? It's doing some ideation, some discovery, maybe a prototype, and then handing back the findings, the certainty of that work back to the core team so they can then prioritize and build it. And that was kind of one that I didn't expect, but that seemed to have some value for organizations.
It's sort of like a hub and spoke architecture function. So basically, you've taken something that's there, taken it off, spun it out, made it better, feed that back in to their the findings from it, the good, the bad, then make that the thing more effective.
So that's an interesting one. I haven't done that, and I have to think about why. So I think about it as kind of pioneers and settlers. You kind of got a small fractional team that going out and doing some of the pioneering work, some of that discovery work, if you think about it from a product management point of view, MVP maybe, and then bringing it back in. Now, the downside of that model, right, is now you've got your core data team kind of doing drossy plumbing, right? They're kind of in the factory. They're not getting any of the cool shit. They're not doing any of the experimentation, right? It's not a great model, but it's a model I've seen have value every now and again.
Yeah. I suppose you're totally right. It could drive a divide between the two. In some cases, I think what it can enable is, because those people they're not able to do that thinking. You can actually identify the ones that are actually could be part of the next sort of R&D piece and bring them into it, but also because they've got to learn from it. That mentoring thing as well. If they're all in the weeds the whole time and can't see the wood for the trees, or they can't see new innovative ways of solving problems that they have all the time, but they're too close to them to solve them. Then there's some lessons that can learn out of that.
And that's a good point, right? Is that, again, remember, as a fractional team, we're there for a long time, not a good time. And so if you think about it, if you're a fractional team dropping into an organization that has a permanent team, and then you're isolating that team, you're leaving them with the drossy work, the organizational virus, right? That team is going, the amoeba is going to kick you out of their organization eventually, right? Because they're not going to put up with that. So if you come back to that idea of mentoring and helping them, right, providing your expertise and giving them some of the, making sure they're able to change the way they work and have a better experience, then they're going to accept you as part of their team, even though you're kind of outside it. And that is an interesting balance, right? If you've got as a fractional, you've always got to think about, I am a permanent member of this organization, what's right for the organization. And if I do what's right for the organization, then I'm going to be part of that organization for a long time, because why wouldn't I? I'm not, they're getting my expertise and my experience for a fraction of the cost of me or a team of our capability full time. So why wouldn't they do that? But there's lots of reasons and things you can do which kind of break the model. So you've got to be very open and honest about what your business model is.
I think having that. So let's actually go down that one at the moment is the gap between business understanding the data team understanding what the business really need, the business team understanding the complexity and the gravity of achieving that from a data team's perspective. So would this fractional team look to address that? Because there may be more, let's call them business whisperers. Maybe the more can actually talk that business language and actually help to close that gap between the IT and the business of the friction.
So again, we want to focus on the work, right? The nodes and links and how we're doing that value stream. We want to focus where there's friction and where there's constraints. So as I talked about with data collection, ideally we often want somebody in the organization to be having all those conversations at a technical level because it just makes it easier. Same with understanding what to build. As a fractional team, we should bring in the process, right? This is our way of working. These are the templates we use. But ideally, we want to kind of code those, design those with anybody in the organization, because getting access to a stakeholder is typically time bound, right? They're always busy.
Yeah.
You want a certain thing. And if it doesn't kind of fit with the time you have, you're asking for a hiding. So again, if you're being a fractional team for an organization, you have to set the boundaries of what the handoffs are, right? What minimum viable processes. And so, I'm a great fan of the information product canvas because it's my baby.
Yeah.
So what we say is, without a canvas, we won't do any work because we don't have a shared language.
Okay.
Right?
Cool.
If you've got another one, we'll adopt it. But if you don't, I need a shared language because I'm not there the whole time. I have to deliver quickly. I don't have time to go into a workshop for 40 hours because that's, if I'm doing 20 hours a week, if it's a fractional based on hours, effectively there's 2 weeks of my time with adding no value apart from attending meetings, right? Again, when you're fractional, you actually start really focusing on the constraints. If I have to spend 2 hours a week with a customer in meetings that have no value, I'm going to go cut those meetings back because it's my time I'm wasting, not the customers. Because typically fractionals aren't paid per hour. They're kind of paid as a fixed price. And that's, again, one of the differences is you are fixed pricing your work for a period of time. And that's a whole different way of working as an external.
Yeah, well, let's come back to that one of how you actually quantify whether it's a fraction of their knowledge or a fraction of their time. But the other one is, and yeah, I 100% support that canvas of having that common way of common terminology, common objectives that the business have defined. So yeah, that's one thing I know you've talked about before, and so that's it's always a downstream dependency before you do it. What other downstream dependencies do you think there are on top of that, or should everything be in that, and maybe we should look to see what's included in it?
So the other, I'm not sure this is going to answer the question where you're coming from, but the other one I think about is the data ops approach, right? So if you're hiring a fractional team, not a fractional worker, you should be expecting them to build it, deploy it, fix it, right? They shouldn't hand it back to you because now what you've got is a fractional worker, not a fractional team. So they should be maintaining those products as if they're products on your behalf, right? They're your team doing that work, and you expect your data team to fix the shit when it breaks. You should expect your fractional data team again. So again, it's that idea of where's the constraints, what sits in the organization and not in the fractional team, where's the handoff points, how do you have that shared language, how do you know who's going to do the work when something needs to be done, and how do you agree that to a degree up front. When you're starting off, though, you won't, right? You don't want to be prescriptive. You don't want to say, this is us, this is you. You just want to go, this is the work to be done. How do you normally work? Okay, and then let's be agile, right? Let's change over time where we need to together. Because that's what a data team would do if they're internal, right? They'd just change the way they work where they find a constraint.
Yeah. So I think so I think what you're saying is sort of like you're paying a BAU, you're paying for a BAU activity, sort of like price. We think it's going to be this amount, and that's the amount you'll pay monthly. And then if we go over, we've underestimated it as a company, or if we've come under, we're doing good because we've delivered it in a way that's.
So this is the key with fractionals, though. Is a good fractional team or a good fractional person will never go over. So if you think about a CFO or a chief marketing officer that comes in as a fractional, what they're very good at is phasing the work to the time they have allocated on their side for your organization. So if you've got a fractional person and they're doing, they're full-time for you but not charging full-time rates, then they've got a problem and they're not sustainable and you're going to have a problem. So what fractionals do is gate or the rate of work. Now, the theory then is they're bringing in expertise and experience and pre-built stuff. Therefore, they should be able to deliver more with less effort. And if they're not, then they're just a bunch of contractors and consultants. And again, there's nothing wrong with contractors and consultants, but they are not fractional teams if they don't bring in ways of working. That means they're faster with less effort, because that's the value you want back. Yeah, that's what you're buying is that fractionalism, fraction of the cost, fraction of the time, fraction of the availability. That's what you're buying.
So I'm putting two hats on, because I mean, some of the things you say, we call ourselves consultancy. We don't do fractional, but we do bring across blueprinted templates to help accelerate stuff, and that's the value add that we say that you get with us. You're buying our time, but you're also buying some of our head start ways of working, where we've got it, all the collective knowledge of the team. So it's not just the individuals. And I don't think all consultants are like that. I think that's how we try and differentiate ourselves. But I think the stage further you're talking about is right now you are this fractional team, and I think it's clearer than having a fractional team. I understand it works much easier from a planning. I think fractional roles can work maybe in different use cases on a smaller maybe scale, very similar to the CFO sort of approach, and probably that high level one. But I think Russell just put a question. I think this is probably more focused on one of the biggest sort of coordinated fractional availability resources of fractional requirement. If you have a fractional team, then you have more and the ways of working. It's more predictable because you've got the historic. But if it's just a fractional person, I think what Russell's saying is probably quite hard to coordinate.
Yeah, and so if we differentiate between a team and a role, and let's look at other fractional ways of working outside of data. You'll typically see that C-level being a fractional role, right? Because they're bringing in expertise and providing advice, but not actually really doing the work to a degree. You'll often see fractional teams where something is highly predictive. So a bookkeeper doing your accounts, entering your expenses and generating your invoices is work you can predict, right? I have this number of invoices, this time of the month they need to be created. I can estimate that workload. So fractional roles tend to be at that high level of advice, or at that detailed level of work that is certain, right? You can predict the amount of effort. Where does a data team sit? Well, in my experience in 30 years, we've never got the predictability, and we want more than advice, right? So we're in this really interesting place where we want to be a bit of both, right? And I think that's actually one of the challenges for a fractional data team. If you've got a fractional data role, now you've got a constraints-based model. And my suggestion is pick a time during the week when that fractional role is available, and then everybody else has to work around that availability. The person that's fractional sets the constraint, and the team then actually has to optimize their way of working for that constraint. Otherwise, it becomes too hard.
I think that works, especially if that is that fractional person, which is most likely to be is a more senior, sort of like directional focused, set the direction, setting the architecture, setting the design principles out at a point. And again, if you can do that with, say, okay, we meet this day, and any of those actions have to be followed up by the week after, that person can work around other constraints as long as they deliver all of actions within that time frame. So what they said they would do, when they do them, is probably less. I would have less dependencies on them intra-week.
But again, if we look at the business model, then to me that's a coach. It's a fractional coach, and as the organization hiring that coach, your goal should be that person upskills your team, because you've got a team, and in 6 months' time, that person's no longer working with your organization unless there's something new to do. Fractional teams are about, for the next 5 years, we are your data team, and we're just going to keep doing the data work. Why would you hire anybody else? Very different.
So that was, So I mean, that was you just answered the question I was going to ask to some degree. But so, for example, that coach, I can tell you that they've lasted between 18 months. I think was probably the length of time that we had one in the traditional sort of fractional roles until we went to that full time. And I think what you're saying there is, but 5 years. Do you think that's when maybe a company organization would grow to a size where now it's grown out to a fractional team now. It's now, or yeah, it's now so big a beast that it's
But
more
why?
cost effective for them.
But why? So if a fractional team is delivering the data value at a fraction of the cost or a fraction of the time, why would you ever hire a team to replace them?
Well, perception. There's always going to be someone that comes in and think I can get better value if I do this myself. And I think there's, and rightly or wrongly as well in some cases. And but I think the other one could be scale. So, and if they have gone and they're going down the end, maybe it's by acquisition or maybe it's by they've launched new products and things like that. So it may be okay. Well, it makes sense for us to go and build all of that knowledge in house. Your fractional team is only going to have the skills that they've got while they're working for that company as well. So there's
so let's look at that, right? So that's saying that let's look at the alternative, right? I hire a data team, and then what I say is we have some acquisition or something, and I'm going to fire my entire team and hire another team for some reason, right? And normally that doesn't happen. Normally what happens is you fire the team and don't
merge
replace
two
them.
teams, so.
Or people leave. The second thing is as a fractional, you're bringing expertise and experience from other organizations on a constant basis because you're working with more than one, right? Next thing, as a fractional team, you don't replace your data platform, you incrementally change it to keep up. So this whole 5 year, let's replace all the warehouse with the latest tech, as a fractional, you don't do that. You can't afford to say to the customer, by the way, do you mind stopping work for a year while we build something new and shiny, right? But you actually have to keep iterating your way of working and your technologies that you use to keep up. Otherwise, you will get disconnected from that customer because they're like, oh, you're on client server, we're in the cloud, right? So there's a challenge being a fractional. The second thing that we focus on is we're really focused on reduction of effort. So if something takes us an hour, what can we do to turn it into 10 minutes of our time? Because the only way we can scale as a fractional team is to reduce the amount of effort to do repeating work. And so you're more focused, I think, on your ways of working on reducing the effort it takes to do a repeatable data task than an in-house team. Now, to be clear, right, I'm biased. This is our business model. This is what we're passionate about, right? But so I don't see, if you're offering a fractional service at a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time, I don't see how somebody can actually hire a team to replace you unless you're doing a bad job, right? But what I do see
or they find another company doing the same service.
Right. But, now, there's a couple of things about this, right? So the first thing is if you're hiring a fractional team, you can't have a black box, right? You can't get locked in where you cannot replace them. So what we talk about is a fractional team should always provide back all your data if it's not been hosted by you and all the business logic they applied to transform that data. Now, you can't just lift and shift, right? But that IP, that business rules, that transformation logic, that's the core that you've got to get back. Otherwise, you are stuck in this black box that you can never get out. It's Hotel California. The other thing that I often see is organizations where the leader of data doesn't care about delivering the service faster or delivering the service at low cost or less risk. That leader cares about having a team of 10 to 20 people on their CV because their goal in life is to get a better job somewhere else. And if that's what you're doing, actually, I say use a fractional team because you can take them to your next job and deliver faster. But often I see that, right? I see actually the alternative is hire a team because the person's hiring the team wants to hire a team. And that's okay. If that's your business model, if that's what you do, go for it. Just be really good at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can take one question. I think it's one from Kaylin here is how do fractional teams manage knowledge transfer, which I think you've just addressed to some degree there. Workload, but a key member decides to leave.
So a couple of things. So visibility, right? Everything that the fractional data team does should be visible to the organization as if they were an embedded team, right? And actually what you'll find is that actually their work is typically more visible because the customer or the organization is more paranoid about that work not being visible than an internal team. If a key member decides to leave from the fractional data team, that's the fractional data team's vendor's problem. Yeah. Now, again, I remember in my consulting world, and you've probably struggled, done this one. We talked about, that's fine. We've got a team of 20, we've got contingency. But realistically, what did we do? We embedded one of our consultants on the customer site. They were in the customer's way of working. We had no visibility of what the hell they were doing, apart from some peer reviews, maybe. If they left, yes, we'd drop somebody in, but there's always a 3-month up thing because the way of working wasn't our way of working, it was the customers. I'd say if you're hiring a fractional data team, it's the person providing that team's accountability to make sure that there is resource available transition. It's their problem. They're the team, right? And they should manage it as a team, not you.
Agreed. All right, well, we're approaching the hour, and we've probably got some updates to say what's coming up in the near future, haven't we? So you're going to Big Data London, I hear.
I am, we're coming over again. This time we've got a stand. So stand Y760. When you come in the front doors, head right to the end. We're bringing over New Zealand chocolate, Whittaker's chocolate, which is the best chocolate in the world. So we have some small bars there if you want a sugar craving. And then, if you want to talk about fractional data teams and how they work, come and have a chat at the stand.
Well, I'm looking forward to catching up there as well. I think ours is X753, and I don't know the directions as well as you. We're in front of the storytelling theatre.
Easy. So for you come in the main door, you go left through the food court, and you're over on the right hand side. I had to look where you were so I could come and steal your swag.
Brilliant. Yeah, we're doing we've called it the data clinic. So we're going to be there with our stethoscopes, and our doctor's jackets. So manning the booth, taking in drop-in clinic problems, data related at least anyway. So looking forward to seeing all the people there as well. We got a high performance data debate, which we'll see if we can find a space for you on there as well. Shane, it'd be good to get your views and things. So next 2 weeks next week I'm on holiday, so there's no show, and the week after it's a bank holiday, so there's no show, so we won't have a show till September. But if anyone wants to find you or reach out to you, what's the best place to find you, Shane?
LinkedIn's probably where I spend most of my time now. If you Google Shagility, that typically finds me. I tend to post a lot when I'm bored, and I'm bored a lot. So lots of content out there of various qualities. Feel free, and any questions, just reach out. I'm always happy to kind of talk about it. We don't have to do the work, just happy to share the way we do it, because we think it is a better way of working for organizations where it fits. So happy to share the love and share the knowledge, as we say. Sharing is caring. So start doing more of it.
Yeah, well, I've always enjoyed your posts and insights into things, and I think I think as you'll find out on this journey exactly where it fits. But I think you found a sweet spot at the moment, and you'll probably find some others that fit around it as well. So I'll be interested to see where this goes. So thank you very much. I know, and also this is like 5 a.m. for you now, isn't it, or something? Is it?
It is 5 a.m. So it's sunrise coming up.
So I appreciate getting up. I'm very American now. I'm very grateful in my British way of you getting up at this early and coming on the show. Always a pleasure on these discussions. So thanks everyone for listening. I think Mark Venn just joined. Steve McCabe. Thanks, shout out to him, and Russell and anyone else I missed. Till next time. All right, we're going to call it a wrap then. Thanks everyone.